The first sign wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some blinking red alert or a panicked phone call. It was a quiet detail, almost nothing, just a line in a procurement summary that didn't belong. I remember rubbing my thumb along the edge of the printout, the cheap paper catching against my skin as I stared at the phrase, "External integration partner, pending approval." We didn't have an external partner. We weren't supposed to. The VA contract forbade it unless explicitly disclosed, and I'd built our entire analytics platform from scratch precisely so we wouldn't need one. But there it was, nestled inside a block of text that should have been airtight. For a moment, I thought it was fatigue. I'd barely slept in days. Federal audits have a way of compressing time until everything smells like burnt coffee and stress. But that line sat there like a splinter. And when I reread the whole document, I noticed something else. The formatting was off. An extra space before a bullet. A margin shift. Someone had copied this section from somewhere else. I should have let it go until morning. I should have eaten something besides a stale protein bar. But instead, I went into our secure portal, the one with the access logs that always made my pulse spike, and pulled activity reports for the past week. The hallway outside my office was dark, lit only by the faint hum of exit signs. The vents rattled overhead in a way I'd grown used to, but that night it sounded like warning. The logs loaded slowly, too slowly, and when they finally appeared, the first thing I saw was his name. Evan, my COO. Hours and hours of late-night access into sections he had no operational reason to explore. Exports, data pulls, file movements, all done quietly, all outside normal workflows, all before dawn when no one else would notice. At first, denial softened the edges. Maybe he was preparing a report I'd forgotten. Maybe he was running projections for the auditor walkthrough. Maybe he was helping for once instead of charming investors and disappearing during the hard engineering pushes. But then the next line appeared, and the next, and the one after that, a file with our proprietary scoring algorithm duplicated and renamed. A draft contract uploaded from an IP address I didn't recognize, located far outside our building. A permissions change that granted Evan temporary admin access for exactly 9 minutes. And buried deeper, a document marked subcontractor scope referencing technology that was unmistakably mine. My throat tightened, but not in panic, more like recognition. Some part of me had known for weeks. The way he'd insisted on handling all communications with the defense subcontractor. The smirk he tried to hide whenever I brought up compliance. The new watch he said was a gift from an old mentor. I'd wanted to believe he was just ambitious, not reckless, not willing to risk federal fraud, not willing to risk me. But the truth bled through the data line by line until it formed a picture I couldn't unsee. Evan wasn't helping me prepare for the audit. He was preparing to sell my platform, my code, my company's entire backbone to a defense subcontractor behind my back. And the way he structured it, the way he wrapped it inside false approval notes and internal memos, meant the liability would fall on me, the founder. The CEO, the black woman they'd assumed didn't understand compliance requirements if anything went wrong. I tried to breathe, but the air felt thick, heavy with the faint scent of printer toner and something sharper. Not of him, not yet, but of what this meant, what he'd already done, what the feds would find when they walked through our doors in a matter of days. My hands shook as I scrolled deeper, and then I found it, the email draft that made everything tilt sideways. It wasn't sent yet, but the intent was carved into every smug sentence. Once Alexa signs off, we can expedite transfer. She's been slow to grasp the scope. Slow to grasp the scope. He'd been planning this, setting the narrative, positioning me as the obstacle while he negotiated a deal that could destroy everything I'd built. The building felt colder the next morning, the kind of cold that creeps under your clothes and makes your pulse skip for reasons you can't name out loud yet. I walked down the hallway with the same practiced confidence I'd worn since the day I signed our first federal contract, but inside, everything was scrambled thoughts clashing, stomach tight, each step too loud in my own ears. The office smelled like stale coffee and the faint lemon cleaner our night crew used, and the mix made my nerves prickle. Evan's voice drifted from the kitchen as I passed, that smooth baritone I used to trust. "Morning, team," he said, light and affable, like he hadn't spent the night trying to rewrite my company's future without me. I kept walking. I didn't trust my face not to betray me. My office door clicked shut behind me, and only then did I feel my breath stutter. I pulled up the access logs again, as if hoping they'd change. They didn't. His fingerprints were everywhere. API calls he had no reason to make, contract drafts he shouldn't have seen, cloud exports labeled with meaningless names meant to look routine. I pressed my fingertips into the edge of my desk, grounding myself in the roughness of the wood. My mind slid back, uninvited, to the first time we talked outside that crowded conference hall in Arlington. That night had smelled like rain and hotel carpet. I remember clutching my badge and pretending I wasn't irritated by the endless parade of men explaining interoperability to me like I hadn't built our analytical engine myself. When I stepped out onto the terrace for air, he was already there, leaning against the railing in a dark blazer and a smile he practiced in the mirror. I should have recognized the kind of man who smiles with only his mouth and not his eyes. "You're Alexis Morgan, right?" he'd asked, extending a hand. "I caught your panel. You've got the best technical mind I've heard all week." I'd laughed, mostly because I wasn't used to anyone in this industry leading with that. "You actually listened, took notes," he said, patting his jacket pocket. "Real notes, not the kind men take just to look interested." I'd raised a brow. "That? A common habit of yours? Looking interested?" He grinned. "Only when someone is worth listening to." I remember the warmth in my face then, the mix of flattery and relief. I'd been bootstrapping alone, exhausted, and here he was, a former defense contractor who spoke the language of procurement cycles and compliance frameworks like it was native. We talked for 20 minutes, or maybe an hour, long enough for me to feel something I rarely felt in this space, seen. He'd warned me casually about how messy federal funding pipelines could get. "What you're building!" "It's gold," he'd said, "but you need someone who knows the terrain. People will try to run circles around you if you don't." I should have heard the arrogance in that. Should have clocked how his eyes drifted a second too long at my badge, assessing the value behind my name. But I was tired, hopeful, and hungry for someone who didn't talk down to me. When he pressed his card into my hand, his fingers brushed mine. "Call me if you ever want to scale this thing," he said. "You shouldn't have to do it alone." And just like that, the seed was planted. Weeks later, after another brutal sprint to meet a compliance deadline, I reached out. Back in my office now, staring at his access logs, I felt the sharp sting of that memory tightening into something uglier. He'd been assessing me from the start, mapping my strengths, my blind spots, the places he could eventually wedge himself into. A Slack ping broke through my thoughts. "Evan, can you review the subcontractor memo today? They need sign-off!" My chest went tight. Not panic, just anger sharpening itself. He was still pushing forward, still performing like nothing was wrong, still betting on me being the trusting, overworked founder who would sign whatever he put in front of me because he wore confidence like armor. I typed nothing back. Another ping. "Evan? Alexis? Everything good?" My finger hovered over the keyboard. The vents hissed overhead, that thin metallic sound that suddenly felt like pressure building. I closed Slack. I needed a plan before he sensed anything shifting, before he realized I knew, because he'd already made his move. I walked into the morning stand-up late on purpose, letting the room settle before I entered. I needed to see his face, unfiltered, unworried, unaware. The team was circled around the glass conference table, half asleep, sipping coffee that smelled burnt even from the doorway. Evan stood at the front, sleeves rolled, that confident stance he used whenever he wanted to broadcast authority. He looked relaxed, too relaxed, as if he hadn't spent the night sneaking through my systems. "Alexis," he said when he saw me, smiling like we hadn't just crossed a fault line, "we were just going over VA deliverables. We'll loop you in. Loop me in." My jaw ticked, but I kept my expression neutral. The team didn't need to sense anything yet, not until I was ready. "Perfect," I said, taking my seat. "Let's hear it." He launched into an update, moving his hands the way he always did when he wanted people to follow his lead broad gestures, smooth transitions, that corporate rhythm he'd mastered. But beneath it, I heard it. The cracks, the careful positioning. He spoke in a way that nudged credit his direction and responsibility away from mine. Terms like "our strategy" instead of "her platform." "My discussions with partners, not the company's obligations." Then he said it. "We may have an external integration partner joining soon. Nothing final, but it could streamline deployment." My head snapped up so sharply the woman next to me flinched. The vents hummed faintly above us, and the smell of someone's microwaved oatmeal drifted in sticky, sweet, nauseating. "External partner?" I asked, voice calm enough to fool anyone who didn't know me. "For what portion?" Evan glanced at me, a flicker of something crossing his face. "Just for a small data handling component. Very standard. Low impact." "Which component?" I pressed. He shifted his weight. "We'll discuss offline. Not with the team watching. Not where he could slip." I leaned back in my chair, fingers resting lightly on the cold edge of the table. "We'll discuss now," I said, keeping my tone even. "So we're aligned." The room went quiet. He didn't like that. His jaw tightened just enough for me to notice. "It's minor, Alexis," he said. "Let's not bog everyone down. You've got a lot on your plate already." I caught 3 team members glance at each other. Tiny, subtle looks, doubt forming, narrative shifting. He'd been planting seeds. "Then it shouldn't take long," I said. He exhaled slowly through his nose, a silent warning I'd once mistaken for patience. "We'll talk," he repeated, firmer this time. Then, looking at the team, added, "Let's move on." I let the meeting roll. I didn't trust myself to speak again without my voice cracking, not from fear, but from fury so sharp it felt like it could cut through my teeth. When it ended, people funneled out with soft chatter and the squeak of rubber soles on tile. Evan stayed behind, of course. He wanted a private moment, control, spin. "Alexis," he said quietly once the door closed, "you good?" I studied him, the faint cedar cologne he wore forming a sharp contrast to the stale office air. He looked the picture of concern, brows drawn, voice soft. "Define good," I said. He chuckled lightly. "You seemed tense. I'm trying to keep things smooth with the auditors coming. You know how complex this stuff is. No need to stress yourself. Stress myself." The condescension was so velvet I almost missed the blade inside it. "Then be straight with me," I said. "What external partner?" He smiled, hands sliding into his pockets. "Trust me, it's harmless." There it was, the phrase he always used when he was hiding something. My pulse thudded once, hard. I stepped closer. "I need the name." He shook his head. "Later. When it's relevant." "It's relevant now," his smile thinned. "You're being emotional about this." There it was, another tell. Another attempt to put me in the role he needed, reactive, irrational, easily dismissed. I didn't respond, not verbally. I simply held his gaze until he broke it, just for a second. But that second was enough. It told me he felt the walls beginning to shift. He grabbed his tablet. "We'll talk," he said again, "after I wrap a few things." Then he walked out, leaving the faint scent of his cologne and a lingering arrogance in the air. As the door clicked shut, I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The room felt too bright, too close, the light bouncing off the glass walls in sharp angles, like the whole space had turned brittle. He was confident, too confident. He thought he still controlled the timeline. But as I stood in that empty room, staring at the chair he just occupied, one thought crystallized with terrifying clarity. I wasn't going to confront him, not yet. I was going to trap him. The office felt too bright after he left. Fluorescent light bouncing off the glass walls, turning everything sharp and reflective, like the space itself was waiting for something to break. I pressed my palm flat against the table to steady the tremor in my fingers, breathing slow until my chest loosened enough to think clearly again. I couldn't confront him. Not when he still believed he controlled the narrative. Not when he was already laying groundwork to make me look unstable if things went sideways. Outside the meeting room, footsteps moved in patterned rhythms, heels clicking, chairs rolling, the faint scrape of someone dragging a whiteboard marker across the glass in one of the breakout spaces. Normal office sounds. Except nothing felt normal anymore. Back in my office, I locked the door. Not something I did often, but today, I needed the barrier. The hum of the ventilation system slipped under the door, uneven, like a breath caught halfway. My computer screen lit the room in pale blue as I pulled up the access logs again, this time with the intention of digging deeper, not just reacting. I filtered by unusual activity signatures. Dozens of entries surfaced, buried, disguised again. Evan had been careful, but not careful enough. He thought I wouldn't notice anomalies in metadata. He thought I'd be too overwhelmed by everything else to catch timestamps shifted by milliseconds, to track documents copied to hidden directories, to see the trails pointing straight to him. He underestimated me. The deeper I went, the more obvious it became. This wasn't a single bad decision. It was a pattern. Weeks of planning, coordinated moves, carefully timed access, and threaded through it all was a name I recognized, a defense subcontractor with a shiny reputation and a history of cutting corners when they thought no one was watching. My stomach turned, not from fear this time, but from clarity. From the knowledge that he wasn't just selling my code, he was tying my signature to a contract that violated federal rules so severely that the auditors wouldn't ask many questions before assuming I had orchestrated it. He was willing to sacrifice me to protect himself. I flexed my hands, trying to release the static buzzing under my skin. My throat felt tight again, but not the way it had the night before. This was something colder, sharper, a truth settling into place. I needed help, not a lawyer on retainer, not a board member who'd ask for clarity while patting my shoulder. I needed someone who understood how to pull apart digital evidence without leaving a trace. Someone who knew my code, my architecture, my blind spots, someone who wouldn't question my instincts. I thought of Maya. The name hit me like a jolt, so sudden it knocked me still. Maya, who'd built the first version of our HIPAA-compliant encryption layer with me in my cramped apartment kitchen. Maya, who left a year ago for a cybersecurity firm when our contract load outpaced our infrastructure budget. We hadn't talked much since. Startup chaos, missed birthdays, that familiar drift. But she had once looked at my whiteboard, messy and overworked and half erased, and said, "Lex, you need to trust me with the back end or you're going to burn yourself out before launch." And I had trusted her. I hadn't realized how much I missed that until right now. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I pulled up her contact. I hesitated. Calling would be messy. Calling meant admitting I'd let someone in who was now threatening everything I'd built. Calling meant saying out loud the truth I'd been holding like a bruise. I had trusted Evan and it was going to cost me. I typed anyway. "Me? You free tonight? I need a friend, not an engineer, not official." The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. A moment later, Maya. "Damn, that sounds like trouble. Maya, my place or yours?" "Maya, also bring coffee, the strong kind." A tiny laugh escaped me, more relief than humor. I typed, "Me, your place." "And yeah, it's trouble." Her reply came immediately. "Maya, then get over here fast. And Lex?" "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out." I stared at the screen until her words blurred. The vents hummed, softer now. The office didn't feel as suffocating. Because for the first time since I saw that doctored memo, I wasn't alone. I grabbed my laptop, my external drive, the printouts Evan thought I'd never notice, and slipped out the side exit before anyone could stop me. Tonight, I tell her everything. Maya's apartment always smelled like roasted coffee beans and warm cedar, a mix that hit me the moment she cracked open the door. The hallway outside was dim, but inside her place the lights glowed soft and golden, reflecting off her stack of mismatched mugs and the jars of loose-leaf tea she collected like trophies. She stood there in sweats, curls pulled into a loose bun, a look on her face that made my throat tighten, concern without pity, alert without prying. "Lex," she said quietly, "you look exhausted." I stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind me. "It's been a day." She glanced at the laptop bag slung over my shoulder. "And a half." The sound of the refrigerator humming filled the silence as she walked to the counter. She gestured for me to sit at the little wooden table tucked against the window, the one where we used to sketch out encryption sequences on napkins because neither of us believed in sleeping during early builds. She poured us both coffee dark, almost bitter enough to wake the dead, and slid a mug toward me. When I wrapped my hands around it, the heat surprised me. I hadn't realized how cold my fingers were until the warmth seeped into them. "All right," she said, pulling out a chair and sitting across from me. Her voice shifted, gentle but firm, the tone she used whenever I danced around something painful. "What happened?" "I didn't start with the documents, or the logs, or the contract. Instead, I started with the moment in the conference room that morning. The way Evan said, 'You're being emotional,' the way he dodged every direct question, the way he built a narrative that painted me as scattered while positioning himself as the stable, indispensable leader." Her eyebrows lifted with each detail. "When you said you needed a friend," she said eventually, "I didn't expect federal fraud-level chaos." A broken laugh caught in my throat. "I'm scared, Maya, not just of what he's doing. I'm scared the auditors are going to walk in and think I did this." She didn't say anything for a moment, just reached across the table and squeezed my wrist, grounding me. Then she let go and nodded toward the bag. "Show me!" I pulled out the laptop, the external drive, and the thick envelope of printouts. She watched in silence as I arranged everything in neat stacks, my hands shaking only slightly. The smell of coffee lingered between us as I opened the first log file. "Here," I said, pointing to the cluster of late-night entries. "This is where he accessed the VA documents. Look at the change history." She leaned in, eyes narrowing. "That's not just access," she murmured. "These edits were intentional, structured. Look at the spacing shifts. He spliced in sections from a different source file. See the metadata signature? It's not your editor." My heart thudded harder, but I forced myself to keep breathing. She flipped to the next page, a screenshot of the duplicated algorithm file. "How long has this been happening?" she asked. 3 weeks, maybe more." She ran her thumb along the printed edge, face tightening. "This isn't sloppiness. This is someone building an escape route." The words lodged in my chest like a stone. I pulled up the draft email next, the one with the subcontractor contact CC'd. She read the first paragraph and stopped. "Oh, hell no," she said softly. "He's planning to blame you." The room felt smaller suddenly, the hum of the fridge sharper. "The city noise outside, sirens, distant horns faded until all that existed was the truth laid bare between us." "I thought maybe I was overreacting," I whispered. "Maybe I was reading too much into things." But then I saw that contract draft and— "No," she cut in, shaking her head. "Lex, listen to me." Her voice dropped, low and steady. "You're not imagining this. This is real, and it's bad." I swallowed hard. "What do I do?" She stared at the documents for a long moment, tapping one finger against the table in a slow, thoughtful rhythm. Then she lifted her gaze to mine. We build a timeline, she said, a clean one, with metadata signatures, change logs, access histories, and network traces. We gather everything before he can cover his tracks. And then, she sat back, exhaling. And then we decide who to bring it to. But this, she tapped the edge of the contract, this isn't something you handle quietly. If the feds walk in and see this without context, you'll be the one they go after. The words hit me like a physical blow, not because she was wrong, but because she was right. I closed my eyes, inhaling the smell of cedar and coffee until the shaking in my chest softened. Okay, I whispered, tell me what you need. She gave me a small, fierce smile, the kind she used to wear in the early days, right before pushing a fix that everyone said was impossible. First, she said, I need more coffee. I let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. Second, she continued, I need access to every system you think he touched. We're going to map the whole thing, and when we're done, he won't be able to wiggle his way out of anything. I nodded, feeling something warm settle under my ribs. Not comfort exactly, not safety, resolve, because if I'd learned anything today, it was this. He thought he buried his tracks. He had no idea who was about to start digging. Maya rolled up her sleeves like she was preparing for battle, and in a way, she was. She pulled her laptop closer and opened a clean workspace. No distractions, no background apps, just a blank field waiting to be filled with the truth Evan thought he'd hidden. Her fingers flew across the keys with a speed I'd forgotten she had, each click steady and precise, like her brain and the machine were wired together. Start talking, she said without looking up. Everything you've noticed, everything that felt off, even if it seemed small. I took a breath, the coffee warming my palms as I wrapped both hands around the mug. The first time I felt something was wrong, I said slowly, he started pushing to own all communication with the subcontractor, said he wanted to streamline interactions. He even changed the meeting invites so I wasn't included unless he forwarded them. Her keys tapped faster. Control the flow of information. Classic. And then he insisted on managing the procurement docs for the VA renewal, which he's never done before. He said he knew the language better. Bullshit, she muttered. But go on, I slid the printouts toward her, and this is when it snapped into place. The formatting inconsistencies, the metadata, he spliced in language from another document. You said the editor signature wasn't mine. She pressed zoom on the screen and nodded. It's an editing tool used by freelancers I've seen subcontractors use. Not something he should ever touch internally. That made my skin prickle all over again. And then there's this, I said, pulling up the file on my laptop with the duplicated algorithm. He copied the core scoring logic, renamed it as a generic integration module. Maya's jaw tightened. He was prepping it for independent deployment. This file structure matches how contractors prep libraries for external handoff. The room felt warmer suddenly, or maybe it was just the adrenaline starting to rise beneath my skin. My pulse thudded in my neck. Lex, she said, voice low, this is espionage, not corporate politics, not sloppy work. He's planning to license your tech outside the contract terms. And make it look like I approved it, I whispered. Maya didn't deny it. She just looked at me for a long, steady moment, her eyes soft but fiercely focused. Then she spun the laptop around so I could see what she'd built. A clean timeline with nested bullet points and metadata entries, timestamps, file names, unauthorized access markers, all lining up into a story that made my stomach hollow out. This, she said, pointing at a cluster of entries, is your smoking gun. Change histories prove he edited federal documents without your authorization. That alone could get you dragged into an investigation if you can't show you neither approved nor initiated it. I swallowed hard. The edges of my vision tingled as the weight of it hit me again. Hey, she said, reaching out to steady my wrist. Look at me. I looked. You're not going down for this, she said firmly. We're building the truth in a way no auditor, no board member, no lawyer can ignore. But we need more. We need to catch him in real time, get evidence of his intent. Intent. The word hung between us like a spark. I blinked. You mean set a trap? Her mouth curled into a slow, deliberate smile. I mean create a mirror environment, a controlled space he thinks is real. If he touches it, if he accesses anything, if he attempts another unauthorized export, it'll be logged with signatures that can't be altered. A cold electric thrill ran through me. Maya, that's risky. No, she said, leaning back in her chair with a confidence I envied. That's necessary. He's already moving. If we don't get ahead of him, he'll shift blame before you're ready. We need to bait him, then catch him. I pressed a hand against my sternum, feeling the wild rhythm of my heart under my palm. What would we even use as bait? She tapped her pen against the table. Something he can't resist. Something that makes him think you're starting to suspect, but not enough to scare him off. She looked up, her eyes sharpening with an idea. A fake subcontractor approval document, she said softly. Partial. Incomplete. Something that suggests you're reviewing it. Leave it somewhere, he'll find it, but not obviously. My breath left me in a shaky exhale. He'd open it in seconds. Exactly. She lifted her chin. And when he does, the trap logs everything. And I mean everything. The refrigerator hummed behind us, a steady, low sound that somehow made the room feel more dangerous and more alive at the same time. I leaned back, the chair creaking beneath me, and stared at the ceiling for a moment. If we do this, there's no turning back. Not for him, not for me. Maya met my eyes with unwavering calm. Lex, he already made his choice. Now, we make ours. Something inside me, fear, anger, betrayal shifted, turning heavy and clear. All right, I whispered, let's do it. She nodded once, decisive. Good, because tomorrow morning, we build the trap. Maya insisted we start early. She said the trap needed to be built before he touched anything else, before he got suspicious, before he could spin even one more narrative behind closed doors. So just after sunrise, when the sky was a hazy wash of gray and gold, she texted me, Maya, I'm setting up. Come when ready. Maya, and bring breakfast. I need fuel to ruin a man's life. It should have made me laugh. Instead, it made something in my chest loosen just enough to breathe. By the time I got to her place, the smell of toasted bread mixed with warm electronics filled the air. Her monitors were lit up with code, logs, and security dashboards that pulsed softly in the dim room. Coffee brewed in the corner, sending rich, bitter notes drifting over us like armor. She pushed a second chair toward me with her foot, not looking away from the screen. Hope you brought something edible, she said. I held up 2 bags. Egg and cheese croissants. She gave a satisfied nod. Excellent. Let's weaponize them. I set the food on the table and sat beside her, my nerves humming under my skin like low-voltage current. For a moment, I watched the way she worked. Focused, steady, fingers tapping with the rhythm of someone who knows exactly what she's building and exactly how much is at stake. Walk me through it, I said. She pointed to the first window. This is the mirror environment. It looks like your internal document hub, but it's isolated. Anything he does here logs twice, once visibly, once invisibly. He can't erase it, can't overwrite it, can't hide behind system noise. I leaned in, scanning the layout. She'd copied the structure perfectly. Folders, naming conventions, breadcrumb trails that mimicked our real environment. If I didn't know it was fake, I wouldn't have been able to tell. And this, she continued, clicking into another pane, is the bait. The document filled the screen, a subcontractor approval draft. Partial, plausible, sloppy in a way that suggested I was still working through it. It looked real, horrifyingly real. My stomach knotted. If the auditors saw that, they won't. She glanced at me. Lex, nothing leaves this environment unless he takes it. And that's what we need. Proof of intent. Proof that he's not acting in the interest of the company. Proof that he's acting behind your back. The idea still made my hands go cold. Not with fear, with the sheer magnitude of what we were doing. What if he doesn't open it? I asked. Oh, he'll open it. Her tone held zero doubt. This man can't resist knowing more than you. It's practically his personality type. I huffed out a breath. You're not wrong. Besides, she added, I'll make sure it's tempting. She adjusted the document title, adding just enough ambiguity to draw curiosity. Draft integration notes needs review. That's evil, I said quietly. That's effective, she corrected. The room felt warmer suddenly, the tension mixing with the heat from her equipment. Outside, a city bus rumbled past. Inside, everything was still, too still, except for the thrum of possibility in my chest. So, she said, sitting back, next step, you place it. My pulse flickered. In the shared folder? In the folder he stalks daily. She smirked. We both know he checks the procurement drafts more than he checks his email. A beat of silence stretched between us. This was the line, the moment between fear and action. You ready? She asked. I swallowed. I think so. She studied me for a second. This isn't about revenge, she said quietly. This is about survival. He put you in danger. He crossed the line. You're just showing the world what he did. Her words steadied something deep inside me. I opened my laptop and connected to the mirror environment. The familiar interface blinked to life. I grabbed the document and dragged it into the folder. The file dropped with a soft chime. My breath hitched. Maya glanced at her logs and nodded. It's live! I stared at the screen as if Evan could see me right then, lurking on the other end of some invisible wire. Now what? Now, she said, pulling her coffee closer. We wait! Waiting turned out to be the hardest part. I kept checking my phone, my knee bouncing restlessly. The apartment felt too quiet, too warm. My thoughts kept circling, what if spirals? What if Evan had already guessed something? What if he checked the wrong folder? What if he tried to shift blame before we had enough proof? But Maya stayed calm, eyes flicking between screens. She was unshakable in a way I envied. And then, sometime after noon, her eyebrows lifted just slightly. "Oh?" she murmured. My pulse spiked. "What?" She angled the monitor so I could see. A new entry had appeared in the log. Evan Grant. Access draft integration. Notes needs review. Unauthorized location. Unauthorized device. Export attempt flagged. My breath left me in a sharp jolt, like someone had tugged a cord from deep inside my ribs. "Already?" I whispered. Maya nodded, expression flat with focus. "He's not even hiding it!" Another entry appeared. Copy attempt initiated. Redirected to external storage. Shadow copy created. "Oh, Lex," she said softly. "What? This isn't him preparing a pitch." She pointed to the trailing entries. "This is him prepping a transfer packet, a full one. He's trying to extract the entire bundle." My stomach dropped. Then a third entry appeared. Unauthorized credential elevation attempt. Maya froze for half a heartbeat, then leaned forward, her voice a low hiss. "He's trying to activate admin rights. Again!" My throat went dry. "Which means," she turned to me, eyes wide with the sharpness of realization, "he's making his final move." And just like that, the last sliver of denial inside me snapped. Evan wasn't planning a betrayal. He was executing it, right now. The moment the realization hit, he's doing it now. The air in Maya's apartment seemed to thicken, like the room itself held its breath. The refrigerator hummed, a steady undercurrent, but everything else went still. My pulse thudded so hard I could feel it in the tips of my fingers. Maya's eyes darted across the logs, her fingers already moving. "He's pulling everything he needs to finalize the transfer. He thinks you're blind. He thinks you're busy prepping for the auditors." I felt heat rush up my neck. "How long before he completes it? Depends on how cautious he's being." She paused. "But from these logs, not cautious at all." New entries popped up rapidly, timestamps stacking like falling dominoes. File package initiated. Compression in progress. Checksum verification skipped. Attempting external authorization. Maya froze. "Lex? What?" "He's accelerating. He's not even validating the files. He wants them out before anyone notices." A metallic taste crept into my mouth, unexpected, sharp, but I didn't let it pull me under this time. "What do we do?" She inhaled slowly through her nose, eyes narrowing with a focus I'd only seen in the early days of our startup, when she hacked together a HIPAA-compliant encryption layer in one night after a vendor dropped out. That same precision ignited in her now. "We cut him off." She clicked a few keys. "But we need a little more evidence first." "What more could we possibly need?" She pointed at the latest log entry. "Private channel communication attempt detected. He's messaging the subcontractor," Maya said. "If we get a trace of that, it's game over. You'll have federal proof evidence of intent to misrepresent a secured federal asset." My chest tightened. "He's using company channels?" "Not directly." Her voice dropped. "He's using a shadow integration tool, the kind only someone who thinks he's smarter than everyone else would use." I clenched my jaw. Of course he was. Another log entry appeared, then another, faster this time. Unauthorized API handshake initiated. Connection attempt detected with restricted endpoint. Maya's breath hitched. "That's it. That's the start of the transfer." My pulse pounded. "So we stop him now?" She nodded but didn't touch anything yet. Her fingers hovered over the keys like she was listening for something only she could hear. "We need one more piece," she said. "One more clear, undeniable action that shows deliberate export. Something any auditor, lawyer, or federal agent would interpret as intentional misconduct." I stared at the screen, waiting, breath thinning. Then it came. Export attempt authenticated under elevated credentials. A sound escaped Maya. Not quite a gasp, not quite a curse. There it is. He used admin access he wasn't supposed to have. My stomach dropped. "Can you block him?" She cracked her knuckles, the calm slipping back into place. "Oh, absolutely." She typed something fast. Fluid motions, a quick command, then another. Her screen blinked. "Redirecting data transfer, packet frozen, session isolated, credentials revoked." The final entry flashed bright on her screen. "User locked out, ACCEESS terminated." The tension in my shoulders released so abruptly it made me shaky. "Is he?" Done. She sat back. He just hit a wall he didn't know existed. The apartment felt different suddenly. Charged, electric, the kind of energy that comes just before thunder breaks. A second later, my phone buzzed. Evan, hey, are you seeing weird access issues? I'm locked out of something I need for the audit prep. I stared at the screen, shock and fury and disbelief colliding inside me. Maya leaned over, reading the message. He's panicking. Another ping. Evan, can you check system permissions? Might be a glitch. Evan, it's urgent. Urgent. He had no idea what we'd seen, what he'd triggered, what we had proof of. My hand trembled. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline of knowing this was the beginning of the end for him. That's enough evidence, Maya said, her voice steady and resolute. It's time to move. My heart pounded. Move? How? She closed her laptop slowly, decisively. You're going to confront him tomorrow morning. Not screaming, not emotional, calm, controlled. With every piece of evidence printed, time-stamped, and impossible to dismiss. And you? I asked. I'll be right outside your office door, she said, recording. Cold certainty settled in my bones, heavy, unmistakable. Tomorrow morning, everything would break. The building was too quiet the next morning, the kind of quiet that feels staged, like the world is holding its breath. My heels clicked against the polished floor as I stepped out of the elevator, each sound too sharp in the stillness. The lights were dim. The night team always turned them down before they left, and the soft glow from the exit signs cast long shadows across the hallway. My chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with something heavier, resolve, solid, anchored, dangerous. I slipped into my office, closed the door, and laid everything out on the desk. The folder felt heavier than paper had any right to be. Logs, metadata trails, screenshots, access violations. Every page a brick in the structure of the truth Evan had built for himself. Every page proof he thought I'd be the easiest person to erase. I checked my phone. Maya, here! Maya, in the hallway! Maya, recorder's running! I exhaled slowly, grounding myself in the faint hum of the ventilation system overhead. The air smelled like industrial carpet and stale coffee, comforting in the strangest way. Familiar! Mine! A soft ping from the computer echoed in the room. A message from Evan. Evan, morning! Need 5 minutes? We should sync before the auditors arrive. I stared at the screen, jaw tightening. He sounded calm, confident, unbothered, which meant he still thought everything was under control. He still believed he could push this deal through and frame me as the confused, overwhelmed founder who misunderstood the paperwork. Fine, let him walk in thinking the ground belonged to him. I typed back, me, step into my office, a beat. Then Evan, on my way. The hallway outside was silent, no footsteps yet. My pulse danced beneath my skin, fast and insistent, but my mind was cold and clear. I straightened the stack of evidence, aligning the edges. The sunlight creeping through the blinds streaked across my desk, catching the corner of the manila folder like a spotlight. A knock. I swallowed once, then said, "Come in." He pushed open the door, all charm and confidence, the kind of confidence men wear like a second skin. His cedar cologne drifted into the room before he did. He smiled. "Hey, thought we could align before things get hectic." His tone was casual, warm, even friendly. It was almost impressive the way he could slide into that persona. Almost. "Close the door," I said. Something flickered behind his eyes, just a hint of confusion. Or caution, hard to tell. But he closed it. "Everything okay?" he asked, dropping into the chair across from me. His posture was loose, relaxed, like we were discussing scheduling conflicts instead of federal violations. I folded my hands on the desk. My palms were cold, but my voice was steady. "I found something in the system last night." He lifted his brows, concern sculpted carefully onto his face. "Oh, what kind of something?" I let the silence stretch just long enough for discomfort to settle between us. Then I slid the first printed log across the desk. He glanced down at it, expecting, "What? A minor glitch? A question about security audits?" But when his eyes landed on his own name over and over again, his expression changed almost imperceptibly. A twitch in his jaw, a breath too slow, a momentary freeze in his eyes. "What's this?" he asked. "You tell me." He picked up the page, flipped it, tried to keep his face neutral. Looked like a misunderstanding, some routine access I must have forgotten to flag. "Nothing substantial." "Routine?" My voice stayed low. "Controlled. Exporting our core algorithm? Accessing restricted federal files? Editing a procurement document with an unauthorized tool?" He swallowed, the movement stiff. "Alexis, I think you're reading too much into this." There it was, the line he always used. I leaned forward. "Then explain it." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Look," he said finally, softening his tone, "I know you've been under a lot of pressure. All of this can look overwhelming, but you need to stay calm. Don't jump to conclusions." My stomach tightened with an old, familiar anger. This isn't an emotional reaction, Evan. His eyes flashed. Just once. Annoyance or fear or both. I pulled out the next document, a screenshot of his credential elevation attempt. His hand twitched when he saw it. Not much, but enough. This, I said, tapping the page, was the moment you tried to grant yourself admin privileges you're not authorized to hold. He exhaled sharply, leaning back. You clearly don't understand the full picture. Then paint it. His nostrils flared. I was preparing a contingency for the auditors. You've been stretched thin. I was trying to protect the company. My teeth clenched. By creating a shadow contract behind my back? A beat of silence, heavy, tense. Then his eyes sharpened, calculating. You're misinterpreting the documentation. I pulled out the next page. The bait document, the one he'd accessed, copied, tried to export. He stilled. Where did you get that? He asked quietly. I didn't answer. Instead, I placed the final sheet on the desk, the combined metadata log of his export attempt. Clean, precise, impossible to argue with. His face lost color. He breathed in through his nose, slow and shallow. You set me up! The bitterness in his voice was startling. Not frantic, not ashamed, accusatory. Actually, another voice said from the doorway, calm and steady. She didn't. Evan whipped around. Maya leaned against the frame, phone in hand, recording light blinking softly. Because the only person who created this mess, she tilted her head, is you. His face crumpled, shock, anger, realization, all colliding at once. He didn't speak at first. He just stared at Maya, then at the recorder in her hand, then back at me. His jaw tightened, a small pulse flickering at the base like something inside him was splintering. The room felt suddenly smaller, sharper, the air thick with the blend of cedar cologne and the bitter edge of panic he hadn't figured out how to hide yet. Turn that off, he said to Maya, each word clipped. She didn't move. No. His nostrils flared. You can't record me without. I didn't start recording until I stepped inside and announced myself, she said coolly. Which I did, clearly, she lifted an eyebrow. But feel free to keep talking. I'm sure the auditors will appreciate the clarity. He turned to me then, not the smiling COO who charmed investors. Not the polished strategist who always spoke in clean bullet points. This version of Evan was raw, cornered, fighting the realization settling into his bones. I had him. What do you want? He asked, voice low. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation dressed as surrender. What did I want? I wanted not to be here. I wanted not to have spent years trusting someone who carved my company open behind my back. I wanted not to be forced into this position. Black woman defending herself from a narrative he crafted piece by piece, hoping I'd unravel under the weight of it. Instead, I said nothing. I simply slid the entire folder, every log, every timestamp, every trace of what he'd done across the desk. It hit the edge with a soft thud, but the sound felt heavy. Read it, I said. He didn't reach for it. His eyes darted between me and Maya, calculating, recalibrating, angry. But curiosity, that same compulsive need to know more than everyone else, won out. His fingers curled around the folder, knuckles whitening as he opened it. He skimmed the first page, then the second. By the third, he sat back slowly, something inside him collapsing just slightly. You mirrored the environment. Yes, Maya said. You baited me. No, I said, my voice soft but razor-edged. You baited yourself. All we did was let you show us what you were already doing. His throat worked, a swallow he couldn't disguise. You don't understand, he said eventually. This subcontractor deal would have doubled our valuation. You've been cautious. Too cautious. I was trying to move us forward. By committing fraud? My voice cracked. Not loud, not shaky, but with a depth I rarely let anyone hear. By risking everything I built? Everything my team built? He pushed to his feet suddenly, the chair scraping loudly across the floor. You're blowing this out of proportion. Maya laughed once, sharp, humorless. Federal violation of procurement terms, unauthorized use of protected code, attempted misrepresentation of contract scope. Sure, tiny stuff. He shot her a glare, then turned back to me as if she didn't matter. Lex, don't, I said. Quiet. Final. His mouth snapped shut. I stood. My legs didn't shake. My voice didn't falter. Something inside me had gone still cold, steady, immovable. You accessed restricted systems, I said, stepping closer. You copied protected algorithms. You drafted a contract using my name. You attempted to transfer federal assets to an external partner without approval. He flinched at that word. Federal. It landed exactly where he feared it would. And worst of all, I added, you thought no one would believe me if I found out. His breath hitched just barely. Maya stepped forward, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. You done pretending? She asked. Because we've got everything we need. Evan stared at her, then at me, and for the first time since I'd known him, he genuinely looked unsure, not outsmarting, not strategizing, just stuck. Like the ground he thought was solid had given way beneath him. He opened his mouth again, but this time no words came. He looked at the documents spread across my desk, each one a mirror showing him exactly who he had been when he thought no one was watching. And I saw it then, the moment he realized he'd lost. Not a dramatic collapse, not an outburst, just a quiet flicker in his eyes, like something caved inward. I walked around the desk, stopping inches from him. "Your access is suspended," I said. "Effective immediately. Security will escort you to collect your things." His jaw clenched. "You don't have the authority." "I do," I said, "and even if I didn't, the board will. Once they see this, they'll vote unanimously." He took a step back, as if the words themselves had shoved him. "And Evan?" I added, voice low, steady, cutting through the air like a blade. "I'm already preparing the materials for the auditors." A visible shiver went through him. Maya opened the door. "Let's go!" He looked between us, anger tightening his face, fear tightening his shoulders before finally walking out. His footsteps were heavy, uneven, the sound of a man who knew the walls had closed faster than he could think his way out of them. When his silhouette disappeared around the corner, the silence he left behind felt cavernous. Maya shut the door gently, then exhaled shakily. "Holy shit!" I let out a breath I'd been holding for weeks. "It's not over," I said. "No," she agreed. "But this?" She gestured to the empty doorway. "This was the hardest part." "Maybe so. But the fall hadn't even begun yet. The boardroom always felt too cold, like someone designed it to keep people awake with discomfort. The vents overhead pushed a steady current of chilled air that brushed against my skin, raising goosebumps beneath my blazer. The long glass table reflected the overhead lights in harsh angles, making everything appear sharper edges of folders, reflections of faces, even the tension in the room itself. I sat at the head of the table, back straight, hands pressed flat against the polished surface to keep them steady. Maya stood near the wall, her laptop open, every piece of evidence queued and ready. She wasn't part of the meeting, technically, but I'd made it clear she was staying. No negotiation. The board members filed in one by one, some looking curious, others concerned, one or two clearly annoyed at the early morning summons. Aaron walked in last, adjusting his tie with a frown etched into his forehead. He avoided my eyes. Of course he did. He was the one Evan had been whispering to behind closed doors, setting the stage, building his narrative, stretched too thin, struggling to manage federal expectations. "I'll help stabilize things." Stabilize. The word made my stomach twist. "Good morning," I said when they were all seated. My voice didn't shake. I was grateful for that. "Alexis," Aaron said, folding his hands, "before we begin, can you give us a sense of urgency here?" Evan says. "He no longer speaks for this company," I said, cutting him off. A murmur rippled around the room. Aaron blinked. "Come again? His access has been revoked, effective immediately." "I'll walk you through the evidence." "Evidence?" he repeated, a hint of disbelief. Or worse, condescension sliding into his tone. "Alexis, if this is a personality conflict?" "No," Maya said from the wall. Her voice was calm but carried enough weight to make him turn. "This is a federal compliance matter." Silence snapped through the room. I opened the folder. The first document slid across the table with a soft hiss of paper on glass. "This," I said, "is the beginning. The logs of unauthorized access, the late-night modifications, the digital fingerprints of someone stepping far beyond their role. Somewhere near the end of the table, Laura." The operations representative leaned forward. "He touched procurement drafts? Without authorization?" "Yes," I said. I slid the next document file duplication of the scoring algorithm, and he copied protected code. Aaron exhaled sharply. "Alexis, that could have been routine." I cut in. "Accidental? Admin sanctioned?" He closed his mouth. "Good." I placed the third sheet in front of them, the attempt to grant himself admin-level permissions. Repeatedly. A whisper of horror moved through the room, realization settling, fear replacing disbelief. I looked directly at Aaron. "Still think this is a personality conflict?" His face went still. Then Maya stepped forward, connecting her laptop to the display. The screen blinked before lighting up with the mirrored environment logs. "Clean! Time-stamped! Incontrovertible!" "This," she said, tapping the screen, "is where Evan accessed a fake subcontractor draft. A draft Alexis never approved. A draft that violated federal terms. He attempted to export it within minutes. He used unauthorized credentials to do so." A beat of silence. Then another. "Finally! Andrew!" One of the investor seats leaned back and let out a low breath. "Unbelievable." Not unbelievable, I said, feeling heat rise through my chest, steady and sure. Deliberate. He planned to sell our federally protected platform to an external subcontractor. He structured it to look like I signed off, and if the auditors had walked in tomorrow and found this, I held up the final sheet proof of his external handshake attempt. They would have assumed I masterminded it. Silence tightened the room like a vice. Laura spoke first. What's the planned remediation? I straightened. Immediate removal for cause, notification to federal auditors, full disclosure with evidence, and cooperation during their review. And Evan? Someone asked quietly. I let the question hang. Let the weight of it settle. He's gone, I said. And if he attempts retaliation or narrative rewriting, we have everything we need to shut it down. Aaron swallowed, finally meeting my eyes. His voice was soft when he spoke, guilt threading through it. Why? Why didn't you come to us sooner? A bitter laugh nearly escaped me. Because you believed him more easily than you ever believed me. He dropped his gaze. The room went still, the only sound the faint hum of the vents above us. Then Andrew cleared his throat. I move to terminate Evan Grant for cause effective immediately. Laura nodded. Second, all in favor? Andrew asked. Every hand rose. Unanimous. The vote echoed in the silence like a door slamming shut. Clean. Final. Something inside me sagged. Not relief. Not yet. Just release. The kind that comes when a weight you've carried alone finally lifts off your shoulders, even if only for a moment. When the meeting adjourned, people filtered out quietly, some offering nods, some looking stunned. Aaron lingered. Alexis, he said, pained, I'm sorry. I didn't respond. Not because I was cruel, because the apology wasn't for me. It was for his conscience. Maya waited until he left before walking over. You okay? She asked. I exhaled slowly. I don't know yet. But one thing was clear. The fall was happening. For 2 days, HR escorted Evan's boxes out of the building. Not because he had that much to pack. He didn't. But because every time he tried to slip in through a side entrance or swipe a badge that should have been deactivated or demand access for urgent contract continuity, someone had to stop him. The office buzzed with quiet whispers, half-truths drifting like dust in the hallways. People avoided eye contact. Emails were shorter. Black channels went still when my name appeared. The fall had started, and everyone knew it. But the real reckoning came when the federal auditors walked in. It happened early, too early, on a morning thick with fog. I heard the elevator ding through my closed office door, followed by the heavy thud of footsteps, the shuffle of papers, the clipped tones of people who didn't waste time on small talk. Maya had insisted on staying nearby. She wasn't part of the meeting, but she sat just outside the door with her laptop open, running quiet diagnostics like a silent guardian. The hallway smelled faintly of printer toner and stale energy drinks. Some poor analyst had been working overnight. Then the knock came. Sharp, measured, I stood, smoothing my blazer even though my palms were sweating. When I opened the door, 3 auditors stood waiting. 2 men, 1 woman, all wearing badges that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Ms. Morgan? The woman asked. Yes. She nodded. We appreciate your cooperation, shall we? She gestured toward the boardroom. It was surreal to walk the same hallway I'd walked 100 times, but today, with federal regulators beside me, every step echoing too loudly, the boardroom felt colder than usual. The vents were blowing hard enough to ruffle the edge of my papers. I took my seat. They took theirs. The door clicked shut behind us with the kind of finality that makes your throat tighten. Before we begin, the lead auditor said, is there anything you'd like to state for the record? I inhaled slowly. The air smelled of lemon cleaner and something metallic. Yes, I said. Everything you'll see today is documented, verified, and not initiated by me. Their eyes sharpened. Proceed. I opened the folder. Page 1. Unauthorized access logs. They read in silence, faces expressionless. Page 2. Metadata proving document tampering. A raised eyebrow. A quiet murmur. Page 3. Evidence of unauthorized credential elevation. A subtle shift in posture, interest, concern, understanding. And then I slid forward the mirrored environment logs. The smoking gun. The room went very still. This, I said quietly, is the exact moment he attempted to export a restricted federal asset to an unapproved subcontractor. The lead auditor leaned in, studying the entries with meticulous precision. This session was isolated? Yes. Tamper-proof? Yes. Observed by a third party? I gestured toward the glass wall. Maya looked up from her laptop and gave a small nod. The auditor's eyes shifted between us. And this was all done after your discovery of suspicious behavior? And after repeated attempts to clarify his actions internally? I said. The second auditor, a man with neatly combed hair and a habit of tapping his pen against the legal pad, asked, Did he ever disclose any intent to partner externally? No. Did you authorize this? No. Did anyone on your team authorize this? No. Did the board? I shook my head. No. They terminated him unanimously. The lead auditor exhaled slowly, folding her hands. Ms. Morgan, you understand how serious this is? Yes, I said softly. I understand exactly how serious it is. A long pause stretched between us. Then, you did the right thing coming forward. My chest tightened so suddenly I almost forgot to breathe. Weeks of fear, silent dread, doubt, everything cracked just a little under the weight of those words. I swallowed hard. Thank you, I whispered. We'll need to interview the former COO, she continued. We'll handle that separately. For now, she closed the folder, aligning the edges with a kind of deliberate care. Continue business as usual. We'll be in touch. When they stood, I stood with them. My legs felt unsteady, not from weakness, but from the release of pressure I hadn't realized was crushing me until it eased. They shook my hand, thanked me again, and left the room. The moment the door shut behind them, I let out a breath so shaky it felt like it came from somewhere deep in my bones. Maya slipped in seconds later. Well, I nodded, sinking into the nearest chair. They believe me. Her shoulders relaxed. Good. They should. The hallway outside was quiet again, eerily, strangely quiet. The kind of quiet that follows a storm but promises another one coming. Lex, she said gently, it's not over yet, but this was the hardest part. I nodded. My throat felt tight. Yeah, I whispered. But now comes the fallout, and fallout travels fast. Within hours, the industry ripple began. Phone calls, emails, subtle inquiries from partners, very unsubtle calls from competitors pretending to offer support. By evening, someone forwarded me a screenshot. Evan's LinkedIn profile had changed. Open to work. Title, former COO. No description. Just a hollow, unfinished sentence waiting for an audience that would never trust him again. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not triumphant, not vindictive, just tired. Fallout comes in waves. At first, it's quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like the whole world is tiptoeing around a crack in the floor. No one wanted to ask what happened. No one wanted to say his name out loud. People walked softer in the hallways, as if the building itself was in recovery. But the second wave hit harder. 8 months. That's how long it took for everything to settle. And even then, settle didn't mean calm. It meant transformed. The deposition started 2 weeks after the auditor's visit. 6 hours in a stiff conference room with cheap coffee and a lawyer who kept saying, let me rephrase, like he was digging for a different truth. I sat across from Evan for the first time since the day I fired him. He wouldn't look at me, just kept his eyes on the table, jaw clenched, a sheen of sweat collecting along his hairline. His lawyer tried everything, miscommunication, unclear processes, misunderstood contributions. He even floated the idea that I delegated excessively, a phrase that nearly made Maya choke when I told her. But the timestamps didn't lie. The metadata didn't lie. The mirror trap didn't lie. By hour 4, his voice had turned brittle. When they asked him directly, did you knowingly attempt to export federally protected code to an unapproved subcontractor? He hesitated. 10 full seconds. I acted in the company's best interest, he finally said. It wasn't an answer, and they knew it. The next wave was clients, particularly Kaiser Regional, our biggest partner after the VA contract. Their CIO called me personally, her tone measured. We heard there was a leadership change, she said. I chose my words carefully. We discovered a security breach originating from internal misuse of access. It was contained immediately. No data was compromised. A long pause. Then, well, good. I never liked dealing with your COO. He was too slick, too rehearsed. Another pause. Send me your new security protocols. If you're strengthening internal reviews, we're staying. I hung up the phone, pressed my forehead to my palms, and breathed until my hands stopped trembling. We were going to survive this, not unscarred, but intact. Funding was the next hurdle. Investors hate uncertainty. They treat it like contagion. But when we presented our updated compliance framework, our new internal controls, and a rock-solid roadmap, something incredible happened. They leaned in instead of back. 2 months later, we closed a $10.4 million Series B. It wasn't a miracle. It was the power of transparency and a little fear in people's eyes when they realized how close we'd come to losing everything. I hired a new COO, a woman from a competing analytics firm with a spine made of steel and a laugh like she'd known too many battles to take petty politics seriously. She reminded me of Maya, who I asked to join us full-time as Director of Security Architecture. She said yes after pretending to think about it for 2 dramatic seconds. Rebuilding was messy, exhausting. Expensive legal fees alone hit $340,000 before the government wrapped its review. Some nights I lay awake staring at the ceiling, heart pounding at imaginary footsteps in the office, terrified of missing something, terrified of trusting the wrong person again. But then I'd walk into the building the next morning and see my team working harder, cleaner, sharper. I'd see the architecture we built running smoothly, stronger than before. I'd see Maya leaning against my office doorframe at 9 p.m., telling me to stop pretending you're fine and go eat dinner. And I realized something simple and painful. I wasn't the same woman who walked into this company 8 months ago. I was more careful, more guarded, more aware of the shadows people cast when they think no one can see them. I double-checked logs I once took for granted. I set boundaries I should have set years ago. I trusted slower, but I also trusted smarter. As for Evan, last I heard, he was doing consulting work for a mid-tier tech firm in another state. No leadership title, no equity, nothing that required background checks deeper than a scrape. His LinkedIn went quiet for a while, then resurfaced with vague language about transition periods and strategic realignment. He never reached out, he never apologized, he never tried to spin a new story. Maybe he knew it wouldn't work. Maybe he finally saw the truth of himself written in those logs he thought he could erase, or maybe the silence was his own private punishment. Either way, he was gone. And we were still standing. Some nights I still wake at 3 in the morning, heart pounding, convinced I've missed something, some hidden entry, some access attempt I overlooked, some shadow moving through the network. That kind of fear doesn't leave easily. Betrayal leaves fingerprints inside you, invisible but unforgettable. But then I think about the moment the auditor said I did the right thing, or the look on my team's faces when the Series B news broke, or the quiet strength in Maya's voice when she told me she wasn't going anywhere.